Okay, you're watching part 2 of how to build paper transition sections on your model rockets. And if you missed part 1, go back and watch that part right now, because if you don't, you're going to miss some very important information that's going to affect the outcome of your transition. So the last time we had printed out our RockSim template that looked like this. And it prints out in gray. And our next step is going to be cut it out. And on this particular one, I've removed the gray, and we're going to cut it out. And on the straight edges, I want you to use a ruler. Now, the straight edges, we're going to need an overlap piece that goes on the inside of the transition. So that's what I created, this dotted line here, and I just drew that myself. So we're going to go ahead and cut those straight lines first. And then I'm going to cut this one. And now that overlap piece, I'm going to completely cut it off, and that's what I'm doing now. And when you do this, always lay the ruler on the paper side so that if your knife strays away, it doesn't gouge into the paper. Okay. Now I'm going to cut the inside edge. Now this is the small diameter side, and I'm just going to go real slow so that I get a nice straight cut. Nice smooth cut, I mean. Now I'm going to go completely off, just kind of extend onto that overlap piece. Now on the big diameter, I actually want to cut it a little long, and the reason for this is when we put it on the tube, I want it to hang over the edge. Now this one here is way oversized, but you see how that is? See how it hangs way over? And if RockSim will create the curve so that it just butts up against the edge of the tube, but I want overlap, and I'm going to sand that overlap off later. And you don't have to be exact for this, and this is why you can freehand it. And I just kind of draw a little line around the outside just to kind of guide me so that I try to get an equal width, but it's not necessary. So go ahead and cut that. You can see I am way past the solid line that RockSim had given me. And you'll see the reason for this a little bit later. Okay, the transition is now cut out. And now this overlap, I need that to be a little bit less than the length of the transition. And so here's my end line of that, and I need a little bit less. So I'm going to cut them in here. And again, I don't have to be an exact cut. So that's the piece that I'm going to use. Now our next step is to pre-curl this because we want it nice and smooth. So I'm just going to go ahead and start rolling it a little bit. Okay, and for small tubes, if you have a really small tube, it helps to kind of roll it around another tube, because what we're trying to do here is stretch the fibers a little bit so that we don't get any lumps on our transition, because we want a nice appearance. And we want to do the same thing with this piece too. Again, I just want to kind of roll it over the edge. And if you have a small diameter tube, you can use the curvature of your hobby knife. That works too. Just try to get a little bit of curve to it. Okay, our next step is to glue this onto this, but we don't want to use this. We do not want to use regular glue. The reason is when you use regular glue, the glue has water in it, and it expands the fibers of the paper, and then as the glue dries, it actually contracts the paper, and so you get a nice lumpy area. So we don't want to use wood glue when we're making transitions, so put that off to the side. The glue you want to use is called rubber cement. Now most people don't think of rubber cement in model rocketry in the same breath, but this is actually really good for making transitions. And it's a contact cement. So what we do is we paint it on both sides, and then we join them together and it bonds instantly. But you got to let it dry between when you paint it on. So I'm just getting a little bit on the brush that comes in the bottle. And I'm just going to paint that on. And I'm painting it on the inside of the transition. And I'm going to do both edges. And I'm going to set that aside to dry. And I also need to paint. Now this is, remember we curved it around a knife like this, so the curve is going this way. And so that is the side that I want to paint with the rubber cement. Now if you have a hard time finding rubber cement, you can go down to any artist supply store. Many office supply stores also carry rubber cement. So now this is going to take about 5 minutes to dry, so I'm going to pause here. But right now it's a very shiny, and once it dries it's very dull, so you can tell when it's dry versus when it's wet. So I'm going to pause here and I'll be back in about 5 minutes, but you won't notice that.